Dear students, welcome to the lecture 5 of week 1, that is conceptual foundation, in which today we are going to discuss about export incentive. We are going to understand the concept of export incentive and the importance of export incentive as well. Let us begin the journey. Let us first of all go through briefly about the contents, what all we are going to discuss today. We will be focusing on introduction initially, and then we will move to understand the concept of export incentive, followed by the objectives of export incentive. After that, we will talk about the rationale behind export incentives as well as the importance of export incentives, followed by case studies wherein we will talk about India and China with respect to export incentives. After that, we will try to understand the different challenges in export incentives, followed by future trends, and finally, we will conclude our lecture. At the outset, it is very important to understand export incentives. Export incentives are strategic policy tools which are used by governments to promote exports and support domestic firms in global markets. Domestic firms requires extra support from the government to compete at the international market. Competition at the international market is very stiff and hard, and domestic companies and industries cannot meet out the competition without assistance and support of the government. Thus, export incentives make it easy for the domestic industries to be competitive at the international markets. Export incentives enhance competitiveness by reducing cost, improving access, and encouraging innovation. All these three things, that is, reducing cost, innovation, and market access, are integral for the expansion of the operations of the domestic companies. For developing economies, export incentives are vital for foreign exchange generation, industrial development, and economic growth. Once domestic industries and companies go into the international markets and perform their operations, the goods and services that are offered at the international market provide remittances to the Indian government and country, which are in terms of forex reserves. These forex exchanges, which are known as forex reserve, provide stability to the economy as well as are utilized to buy further goods and services from rest of the world. Similarly, export incentives form an integral part of a country's trade policy framework and help integrate domestic industries into the global value chain. It is very important for the domestic companies to get integration in the global value chain, wherein they can expand their operation, diversify their products, and also work to transfer technology back to the home country. Let us now try to throw some light on the concept of export incentives. By definition, export incentives are financial, fiscal, or policy based measures provided by governments to encourage businesses to export goods and services. They are a kind of motivation for the domestic companies to go for exports and to experiment with their operations in the international market. There are certain key features of export incentives. Number one, they are designed to overcome trade barriers and mitigate market disadvantages. Every country in the international market has certain trade barriers. These trade barriers can be in the form of tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers. These barriers restrict the goods and services coming from a particular country. For exporters, it is always very important that they should be provided support, assistance, and incentives to weed out the effect of these trade barriers. This role is played by export incentives. The second key feature is that export incentives aim to reduce production or transaction costs for exports. The transaction cost for export is an interesting phenomena because if it is reduced, then the goods or services in the international market may become cheaper. Obviously, cheaper goods and services in the international markets or foreign markets provide an extra advantage and benefit as well as further competitiveness in the global economy. The third feature is that export incentives may be direct in nature or indirect in nature. The direct export incentives are the benefit which is taken up by the exporters, and the indirect are the benefits taken by the exporter through auxiliary things such as infrastructure, trade agreements, etc. When it comes to the direct export incentives, they are in the form of cash subsidies, tax refunds, duty drawbacks, etc. Let us try to understand the objective of export incentives. There are five key objectives of export incentives. The first is boost foreign exchange earning. Export incentives promote domestic industries and companies to expand their operations in the international market. By expanding their operations in the international market, they increase their revenue in the international market, thus acquiring more of foreign exchange. These foreign exchange are transmitted back to the country and thus increasing the foreign exchange earnings of the country. The second objective is to diversify export basket and markets. As we all know that in different countries, different type of risks and exposures are always present. If an exporter is targeting only one country and not diversifying, it means that the exposures of international trade and risks associated with that country will not be diversified. Thus, in times of crisis or disaster, the exporter will bear the burden. In this case, the best scenario is to diversify the operations, meaning thereby that exporters should target multiple countries with different risk probabilities. The third objective is stimulate domestic production and employment. With the help of export incentives, a vibe is created in the economy that more of goods and services of the country are being demanded as well as sold in the other countries. This creates a huge market impact and the production in the domestic country increases in order to substantiate the need arising in the international market. This generates not only more production but also it needs more workforce to be included in the production process. This creates more employment and job opportunities in the country itself. The next objective is improve trade balance. We know that if exports are more than imports in one financial year, it is surplus, and if imports are more than exports, then it is deficit. Trade deficits are not a good characteristics of any economy, and therefore export incentives attempts to increase the total value of the exports, thus promisingly promoting balance of trade that will be positive and surplus. or in other case scenario, the export incentives can at least minimize the trade deficit which is faced by a country. The last objective of export incentives is that it promotes technology and quality standards. In order to sell goods or services in the international market, the level of technology and quality should match with the global standards. Once export incentives are provided to the exporters, the exporters may look towards those quality standards as well as the upgraded technology which is being prevalent at the international level, thus promoting technology as well as quality standard in the economy as well. Let us now focus on the rationale behind export incentive. What is the reason because of which export incentives prevail? We all are aware that global markets are highly competitive and domestic producers often face disadvantages such as high production costs at the domestic level, then limited access to finance. This is particularly true for the industries and companies that are operating in developing countries, as well as the inadequate marketing capabilities. Most of the small and medium enterprises, if they are into exports, they do not know how to market their products, even when their products are far superior than other products. Therefore, export incentives provide that opportunity that exporters can market their products in a better manner. Export incentives provide a level playing field for the exporters to compete at the international market, enabling domestic firms to innovate and make use of technology transfers. In addition to it, export incentives also reduce risk, enhances market access, and foster export-oriented or export-led growth in the country. Let us now try to focus on the importance of incentives. We will be discussing them. The first is drive economic growth. Export incentives provide the opportunity to enhance and drive economic growth. This is because, with the help of export incentives, the exports of a country may increase, thus adding the net trade balance, which is also a component of the indicator of economic growth, that is gross domestic product. Thus, because of export incentive, exports increase the gross domestic product of a country. The second is increase foreign exchange reserves. We have already discussed, but let us reiterate that when exporters increase their exports and sell in the international markets, in return they get foreign exchange, that is foreign currencies. These foreign currencies are transmitted back to the country where they become foreign reserves. These foreign reserves are then used by the countries to buy from international markets. The third is promote industrial diversification and technology upgrade. Export incentives provide such type of measures through which the existing or the new exporters can improve their technology. At times, it means transferring technology from developed countries to developed countries, as well as it includes industrial diversification, where more and more goods can be produced in the economy with different type of features. The fourth is enhance global competitiveness. Export incentives provide level playing field to exporters by giving them assistance and other solutions so that they can compete in the global markets with the global competitors. The next is it creates job and support regional growth. Obviously, with export incentives, export increases, because of which the more production is required, and more production is only possible by increasing the workforce. Thus, it finally adds to economic growth and regional growth. And the last point is that export incentives improve trade balance and external stability. Trade balance refers to the difference between export and imports. With export incentives, more of exports will lead to a positive balance of trade. And because more foreign reserves are entering into the country, there will be more economic stability in the economy. Let us now try to discuss all these drivers in a bit detail. Export growth contributes directly to GDP expansion and national income. At times, it happens that an economy is not able to improve the consumption expenditure, investment expenditure, or government expenditure. But it can utilize its exporters to increase the balance of trade, that is, exports minus imports. Because this is a component of GDP, it will then improve the economic growth. Export incentives also stimulate and encourages firms to scale up production, increasing demand for raw materials, labor, and services. In addition to it, higher exports often lead to investment inflows, creating a multiplier effect on the economy. If one unit of investment comes into the economy, it does not have just one unit of impact. It has at least 2 to 3 times unit of impact in the economy, which is known as multiplier effect. And finally, export-led growth has been a key strategies for countries like South Korea, China, and Vietnam. And if other countries adopt this export-led growth, it is important that export incentives be provided to exporters. Let us now try to focus on foreign exchange earnings and the benefit derived through export incentive. Export is a major source of foreign exchange earning, the other source being the remittances by human capital of India, which is being transferred back to India. But the quantification of foreign exchange earnings is more in export activities. When export incentives are provided to the domestic companies, they can sell more products in the international market, thus increasing the revenues and transferring back the earned amount to India in foreign currencies. These foreign currencies become the foreign earnings and foreign reserves for the economy, which can be used further to buy from international markets. In terms of export incentives, when foreign exchange earnings improve, higher reserves strengthen, makes strong a country's exchange rate stability and global credit worthiness. Generally, developing countries needs credit from multilateral organizations like IMF, World Bank, IBRD, etc. and credit worthiness is an important parameter based on which credit can be provided. With increased foreign exchange earning, the credit worthiness of the countries also go up. Similarly, exports incentives they help to enhance foreign exchange earning and this can enable governments to finance imports, service external debt and support currency stability. If we talk about developing countries like India, foreign exchange inflow is critical for developmental financing, which means financing all those activities that are important for development of the country, such as infrastructure, education, health, etc. The third driver is the industrial diversification and upgradation. If an economy is isolated, it cannot upgrade itself in terms of technology and also it will not be able to diversify its industrial output. But once a country promotes exports and helps exporters through export incentives, there is a motivation for exporters to diversify their industrial output. as well as they can further enhance the technology which is being used for production or for other processes of the business. This industrial diversification and technology upgradation encourage value addition and movement up the global value chain. It also promotes technology transfer and adoption of international quality standards. This ultimately results in a more resilient and competitive industrial base in a particular country. The next important feature achieved by export incentives is global competitiveness. Export incentives help domestic firms overcome cost advantage, and by minimizing or reducing the cost of their products or services in the international market, they can compete with other global players. It is very important to remember that generally global players, they have a good marketing team, they have a good feature presentation of the product. However, exporters from developing countries may not be able to access those kinds of marketing strategies. Thus, the alternate strategy of minimizing the cost of the product can be very successful in competing with the global companies in terms of product usage and in terms of sales revenue. Global competitiveness is also very important because with the help of export incentives, there can be more access to finance, tax relief, and reduced transaction costs, which can make export price competitive in the international market. Other important qualitative parameters can also be part of export incentive, such as assistance, which can provide branding opportunity, quality certification assistance, and trade promotion measures that can enhance market visibility. In a nutshell, competitiveness boosts market share and export volume in global trade. The next is employment generation and regional development. Export oriented industries are labor intensive in India, and they can create large scale employment if export incentives push exports in India. Thus, if the trend is that exports in India or any other country is going up, automatically it means that employment linked to exporting activities will go up and there will be more job opportunities. Particularly, there will be growth in manufacturing and services, which will generate indirect jobs in logistic, that is transportation, banking, which is a service, transport, insurance, etc. Incentives will also encourage industrial decentralization, fostering growth in less developed regions, which will provide regional development to the country. Export incentives also helps to reduce regional disparities and supports inclusive growth. Let us talk about strengthening trade balance and external stability. Export incentives can boost exports, and by boosting exports, it means that export minus import may become positive, which means exports will be more than imports. Or it can also mean that if imports are more than exports, the difference between these two may be reduced. Still, imports may be more than exports, but even if the difference is reduced, it will be a benefit related to trade balance. Thus, export incentives always try to narrow down the negative balance of trade or try to promote a surplus balance of trade, which improves the current account of the balance of payment. With this, there is a stable export earnings, which ultimately reduces reliance on volatile capital inflows. The volatile capital inflows generally refers to the portfolio investment which happens into a country. And if we focus more on trade, that is export, the reliance on portfolio investment in the form of capital inflows will decrease. Thus, the improved trade balance enhances a country's macroeconomic stability and policy autonomy. Let us try to look into a case study of India where we'll try to find out the export incentives and what outcomes it has achieved. We have taken here a case study of India, the export incentives that are in place in India right now. There are certain key incentives like RODTP and MES, which are related to duties. SEZ, Special Economic Zone Policy, which came in 2005, which talked about creating certain zones where tax holidays or tax exemption will be there for a certain number of years. Interest equalization scheme to counter the differences in the interest in the two economies. ECGC and Exim Bank, the credit facilities provided by this government institution. An export import bank is for facilitating the transfer of money in export import activities. Because of all these incentives, what India has been able to achieve for the fiscal year 2022-23, the mercantile, that is goods exports of India, was 451 United States dollar, 451 billion United States dollar. The services export was 322 United States dollar, and the top sectors for engineering, petroleum, chemicals and textiles. And all these figures are very good figures for India if we see the last 10 years data. The major markets where India is exporting goods include United States of America, which is a developed country, so it is a good indicator that India is exporting goods to a developed country. United Arab Emirates, which is 7.6% exports. Netherlands is 5.5% exports. What has been the impact of these key incentives which government has implemented under the export incentive? The first is that it has boosted competitiveness and the participation of medium and small medium enterprises has gone up. Similarly, the product range has increased, which means there is been a diversification of products and markets. And finally, the third outcome is that forex reserve and trade balance has improved for India over the years. Let us look towards another case study. This time we are focusing on China, where export incentives have been in place and China has been able to dominate in terms of international trade. The contribution of China towards the global trade has been more than 20% over last 5 years. The key incentives which China has initiated in the economy is the rebates related to value added tax. 5 to 17% of the rebate is being given to cut the export cost, that is to minimize the cost of the products at the international market. As well as they have implemented SEZ policies, they have created several special economic zones in different regions of China, such as Shenzhen, where tax holidays and logistic support is provided. Tax holiday refers to a time limit, say 5 years, where the domestic company will not be allowed, will not be taxed for its operations. Then we have the third thing, low cost credit. The Chinese government has put up a policy of providing credit at very concessional rates via their own government banks. And finally, a geopolitical initiative of China in the name of BRI, that is Belt and Road Initiative, which is basically an initiative where more than 140 markets are targeted and they are trying to revive their maritime silk route as well as road silk route. What has been the impact of all these key incentives on the performance of Chinese exports? If we see the goods exports, that is mercantile exports, it has reached to 3.38 trillion United States dollar in 2023, which is around 14.5% of global trade. The key sectors which has performed well for China are electronics, machinery and furniture. And the key markets where China is exporting is United States of America, where they are exporting around 16.1%. And that is one of the reasons why there had been a trade war between China and USA. And then in the ASEAN market, that is Association of Southeast Asian Countries, where 15.4% of exports has been from China, and then European Union, which is a conglomerate of around 26 countries, 14.8% exports have been going to European Union through China. Forest reserves has also increased. They have now reached to 3.2 United States dollar trillion in 2024, which is quite impressive for China. Because of all these key incentives and the performance measures, there has been a huge positive impact on the Chinese economy, and we can see that it has been titled as the world factory because everything related to manufacturing is being produced at a fast pace and less cost. Similarly, a rapid industrialization and export diversification has been achieved by the Chinese economy. And finally, China right now has witnessed trade surplus with most of the major economies, and that's why it has become a global market power in international trade. The question is, what are the different challenges in export incentives? The first is World Trade Organization compliance. Most of the countries are signatory to GATT and also have participated in World Trade Organization negotiation, which was established in 1995. And in order to be participating, there has been rules and regulations which a country has to follow. However, when providing export incentives to the home and domestic companies, sometimes these export incentives are considered to be in violation of the rule, and the other countries have highlighted that this is quite a kind of unfair treatment which is being met and undue benefit is being given to the domestic companies. Therefore, this is still a challenge where disputes arise and then dispute resolution is gone to the World Trade Organization. The second is fiscal pressure. There is high cost of these export incentives because these export incentives are beared by the government. The government exchequer faces problems because where will be the payment of these subsidies come from? It is from the taxpayers' money, and therefore there is going to be huge pressure on the fiscal monetary valuation, and this is also a challenge, particularly for the developing economies. The third challenge is related to the risk of misuse. Several of the companies may misuse it for to get duty drawbacks, to get tax holidays, exemption, etc. So therefore, a close monitoring is required in that scenario as well. And finally, the last challenge relates to reforms. Incentives should not be one-time incentives. There will be always a need for reform the incentives. Incentives that were given to domestic companies 10 years back may not be relevant today. So, therefore, a regular inquiry and reforming of the incentives is a challenging but a needful task. Dear students, let us see what are some of the interesting future trends in export incentives. The first is green and sustainable incentives. These incentives try to give benefit to companies who are using less of a renewable energy source, whose carbon emissions are also low, thus benefiting the whole environment. The second future trend is digital export promotion. Use of electronic commerce platform, digitalizing of the different documents, and data localization are few things which are going to be very important in the future. The third is high technology focus. Incentives for inculcating artificial intelligence, biotech, machine learning, renewable energy, etc. are going to be the future trend in export incentives. And finally, global value chain integration. It refers to connecting with the rest of the world in production lines. This is also going to be very important because as Indian companies go into the international market, they will have to collaborate, go into joint ventures or licensing agreements, and thus they will become part of global value chain. Therefore, this global value chain concern will also come in the future export incentives. Dear students, let us now conclude what all we have discussed in today's lecture. We have identified and appreciated the need of export incentives, and we have reached to a conclusion that export incentives remain a cornerstone of trade policy in both developing and developed economies. We have also identified that export incentives enhance competitiveness, promotes and stimulates innovation, and support long-term industrial development. In a nutshell, a successful export incentive strategy balances short-term with long-term strategic goals, ensuring sustainable integration into the global economy. My dear students, thank you very much for being with me in this particular lecture.